Hello, everyone. My name is, Zozirozos, Riley, Konshog, whatever you want to call me, and welcome to another video. Today, I'm going to share my experiences with the mental hospitals that I have been to over the years. There are a lot of misconceptions and inaccurate information regarding such care, and I enjoy watching other videos on this topic, so I wanted to share my own personal experiences. For those of you that are new to my channel, I have had psychotic symptoms since early 2020 and was finally diagnosed with schizophrenia in 2022. And I have been hospitalized twice due to my illness, once in 2021 and once in 2023. Before I dive into what it's like and to be in a mental hospital or psych ward, I feel like I should explain why exactly I was admitted to them in the first place. So, let's start with my first visit. Like I said, I've had symptoms of psychosis since 2020, and I was unmedicated for around a year. So I was slowly spiraling out of control and kind of going insane. Literally. My mental health gradually worsened to the point where I made an appointment with my family doctor to request a referral to see a psychiatrist. That meeting with my doctor is what triggered my long path to recovery. The appointment went absolutely horribly. As soon as my nurse appeared in my room, I started bawling my eyes out. I confessed to her that I was fearful for my life and well-being, as I believed I was being stalked and that people were plotting to kill me. Things escalated, and I started panicking and begging her to save me, and luckily, my doctor's office was the neighbor to a mental hospital, the only one in my area. And she contacted the hospital, and they sent like a worker or a supervisor or something to meet with me, and I was an absolute mess. By that point, my father had entered the room with me, and the first thing that I said to him was, "Dad, I think I have schizophrenia." The hospital worker introduced himself and explained what his job was and what the hospital was there for, and asked if I wanted to admit myself to it. And like I said earlier, my goal in this appointment was to get referred to see a psychiatrist. I was not even aware there was a mental hospital here in my little town. I was fearful. I didn't want to go there. I just wanted to go home. But even in my psychosis, I knew I was in a bad place and that I needed help. So I reluctantly agreed to admit myself and become a patient in the nearby mental hospital. I ended up staying there for 7 days, and it was hell on earth in there for me. As soon as they took me in, they took my clothes, my phone, my wallet, everything. Even the cloth to clean my glasses. I had to strip naked and dress myself into hospital scrubs in front of a supervisor, which made me incredibly uncomfortable from the get-go. So I was immediately anxious and in a terrible mood just from that, and then put my struggling mental health and deep psychosis into the mix as well, and I was not a happy camper. As soon as they led me to my room, I immediately started crying and yelling and literally begging them to let me leave. I cried so much and so hard that my nose started bleeding. I remember that. I regret how I acted, as they were only trying to help, but I did not want to be there. I had no idea they would take away so many of my freedoms, such as access to my cell phone, for example. I felt so lonely in there. it was the longest time I went without being around a member of my family. I was able to make 2 phone calls a day to my mother and father, but that only made me miss them more, and I just cried a lot the entire time I was there. I was in a bitter mood, and anytime a nurse or doctor came to see me, I would just beg them to release me so I could go home. But anyway, enough of how shitty my mood was. What was it actually like in there? I will get into this some more during my talk about my second visit, but um, it really wasn't that bad. I believe the hospital I was in could hold like 20 something patients at a time. We each had our own rooms, our own bed, and our own shower and toilets, though the bathrooms in the rooms do not have doors on them. We were given 3 hot meals a day. They were cooked and prepared at some cafeteria by some other company, and they were delivered in a truck to my hospital. I remember the food actually being pretty decent. Like it was better than the food I was served as a child, like in school. I live in the South, so for breakfast they would have things like grits and eggs, and lunch would be something like barbecue. And I remember once a week the hospital would have like a fried chicken night, and that was the best meal I had while I was there. Patients tend to stay there for at least 7 days, so you are guaranteed to have some fried chicken at least once. Despite each patient having their own rooms, we really weren't alone very often outside of the nighttime while sleeping. There would be regularly scheduled group activities ran by the nurses. We would do things like making art, playing bingo, watching movies, and if the weather was nice, they would let us sit outside in a small enclosed area with like some tables and grass. I remember it having high walls, like a prison, for example. These group activities were not mandatory, but they kind of pushed us to be social and try to make an effort to join in, because the more willing you are to do these things, the better chance you have at being released. During my first visit, however, I barely joined in on such activities. I was in such a sad and foul mood that I just wanted to be alone. I kind of just laid in bed all day and cried. I remember the beds being terrible. I think sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag would have been more comfortable than those things. Um, let's see what else. The hospital had 2 like living areas, I guess you can call them. It had things like chairs and sofas and a TV, though we could only use the TV during certain hours of the day. The patients spent their downtime between scheduled activities by playing card games like Uno and poker. We also had access to a couple of vending machines. Patients' families could leave them some money, and they could be taken out in small increments to get a quick snack if you get hungry. I remember there was always a nurse on hand that carried a clipboard around, that had the job of checking in on all of the patients to make sure they were safe and accounted for. I believe they would make a trip around the hospital and check each room once every 20 minutes or so, though they would check more frequently if that patient had a history of self-harm. So I stayed there for 7 days. I was released with a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, which even my uneducated ass knew that wasn't correct. I believed they slapped me with that diagnosis because I was so moody and I had a short temper during that visit. It ended up taking a year of seeing multiple psychiatrists to finally get the correct diagnosis of schizophrenia. So, that was a mess. The first visit was horrible. I don't think it helped me in the slightest. I left that place so bitter and annoyed because I felt like I wasted my time since they gave me an incorrect diagnosis. Fast forward 2 years, and it is the summer of 2023. My schizophrenia was getting worse, and my mental health overall was even worse than it was during my first hospital stay in 2021 that I just spoke of. So, what happened? I had my correct diagnosis finally, and I was on medications, but I still relapsed so hard to the point of fearing for my life again. Well, I had a huge trigger moment. One night I was browsing Facebook as I always do. I know I'm chronically online. Anyway, I was browsing friend recommendations, and I randomly came across my first bully from elementary school, and that hurt me tremendously. I quite literally instantly became fearful for my life. I believed my bully was the start of all of my mental health problems, my autism, my OCD, my schizophrenia, everything. I blamed him for everything, and I thought he found me again, and that he was going to finish the job, so to speak. I believed he was stalking my house and my every move, and I believed he was plotting to murder me. Yada yada. Around a month of extreme paranoia later, and I was in the deepest psychosis I had ever been in. I was an absolute shell of a person. I showed no emotion and was kind of dead inside from sincerely believing I could die at any moment. This sounds horrible, but for the sake of explaining, I'm going to use this example. Imagine living life with a loaded gun to your head for a month, and the trigger could be pulled at any moment. As you may imagine, your heart would be a mess, and the adrenaline from the fight or flight would be insane. I was pretty much permanently in that mindset for a month straight. I was so drained and out of it. By this point, I was so far gone that I honestly do not remember much. But I will try to piece together what happened. A month passes, and I finally just gave up. I decided I was either going to kill myself before my bully got to me, or I was going to admit myself to the hospital again. I made an appointment with my psychiatrist and told him everything, and the ball starts moving, and I make a call to the hospital asking to be admitted. However, they told me no. That's right, they would not let me admit myself despite my problems. The reason they gave me was people in psychosis cannot admit themselves to a mental hospital because they claimed it could have been the voices in my head telling me to do it. That sounds incredibly stupid, but that's the reason they gave me. So what the hell did I do? I had to go to the emergency room in a standard hospital and tell them my problems. They understood the severity of the situation, and they admitted me to the psych ward floor of that hospital. I remember the least about this stay. The only thing I remember is having to naked in front of a security guard and doing a urine drug test. Sorry. I stayed there for several hours, and then after waiting forever, they told me they would be moving me via ambulance to the mental hospital that I spoke of earlier for better treatment. That was a bizarre experience. I had never been in an ambulance before. I don't remember much due to the psychosis, but I remember being strapped down to a stretcher and loaded into the back. I remember there was a man asking me questions from the passenger seat, but all I remember is him asking me for my name and what my diagnoses were. one ambulance ride later, and I arrived at the hospital. They unloaded me, and I was checked in by some other security guard. They did the standard stuff any patient has to go through, and they led me to my room, and I got all settled. I remember the first thing I did when I got there was sit at a table with some patients that appeared to be my age. We introduced ourselves, and they taught me how to play Uno. That was really nice. They were very friendly. So it was the same mental hospital as the one I spoke of earlier, so I won't repeat myself. But this visit went far better than the first. I was in much higher spirits and was openly willing to receive the help that I desperately needed. However, the first night was terrible. Over the course of that past year, I had began self-harming every night, and that first night in the hospital was no different. While a nurse was doing his routine checkups on the patients, which they do every 20 minutes or so, even at night, they caught me crying in bed and asking what was wrong. I simply remember telling the nurse they told me to hurt myself, and they being the voices in my head. So that was a mess. They wanted me to change rooms to one that had windows for a nurse to watch me 24/7, but I managed to talk them out of it, and I was left in my original room. However, I believe a nurse had to come and check on me every 15 minutes to make sure I was safe. Still to this day, that was the last time I self-harmed. I am over a year clean, and that makes me very happy. um, like I said, I was in such deep psychosis that I honestly do not remember much from this most recent visit. I remember being drugged out of my mind. I was on such an insane dose of antipsychotics. My vision was so blurry that I could barely see, even with my glasses. And I remember being so incredibly tired, like the most tired I have ever been in my life. It was to the point that I would literally fall asleep while someone was talking to me. It was bizarre. I was more willing to participate in the group activities this time around. As far as I know, I went to every scheduled activity with the other patients. I socialized far more than I did the first time. I remember I even met another guy that was my age that was also in there for schizophrenia, and that was really nice. I remember his name was Luke, and he was an artist. Super nice guy. I always saw him making this insane abstract art with crayons. I believe schizophrenics can make great artists. Their minds work so differently than anyone else's. Anyway, that visit was honestly pretty nice. I was still sad I was in there, of course. No one wants to be in a mental hospital, but I dealt with it. I remember missing my family and friends and crying because of that. I remember just playing music in my head to pass the time, especially Taylor Swift. Her songs were in my head the entire time. I will never forget that. But something scary did happen while I was in there. So twice a day, each patient has their vitals checked to make sure they are physically healthy. They would check things like my heart rate, my blood pressure, and my temperature. All the patients would line up and wait their turn to be checked. I don't remember much, but I remember standing in line early in the morning and feeling like shit. Like I was so dizzy and lightheaded, and I wasn't sure why. I kept telling myself the feeling would go away, but it just got worse. I ended up fainting and I collapsed on the ground. I remember the patient screaming and the nurses rushing to my aid, lifting me up and helping me to a chair. I remember I felt completely fine after I sat down, like nothing had even happened. But it turns out a medication they were testing me with, they were testing with me was lowering my blood pressure by quite a lot, which caused me to faint. Um, I will never forget what happened next. I remember the patients that were there with me were very religious. Several of them lined up to me and took turns placing their hand on my shoulder and praying for me. Despite being a Buddhist and not a Christian, that really touched me a lot. These people were struggling just like me, many of them depressed or even insane or even suicidal, but they were still humans. Their brains may not have been in the right place, but their hearts were. And that memory would stay with me forever. Every day after that incident, I remember there was this funny guy in there that would tell me, "You ain't gonna fall again today, are you? You scared the shit out of me." And we all we all laughed it off. The other patients were probably my favorite part of being in a mental hospital. There was such a huge variety of people. I mean, there was there were whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, ranging from 18 to like 79. And everyone was so kind to each other. And there were some pretty serious cases in there as well. You know, like schizophrenia, like bipolar personality disorder, and more. But we all treated each other like family. Like people would share food with each other, play cards, do each other's hair, and even just sit and share their experiences and offer life advice. It was really nice. I even added that other schizophrenic guy on Facebook after I was discharged. So yeah, those are my experiences with the mental hospital. Keep in mind, every mental hospital is different. Experiences vary, and who knows what yours would be like. Some may describe it like a prison, as some freedoms are taken away from you, and you must follow a strict schedule. But I enjoyed my last visit. It really helped me a lot, and it put me on the right path to recovery. It has been over a year since my last visit, and I am the happiest I have been since I was like 8 years old. I am grateful for my stays at the mental hospital. The last one genuinely changed my outlook on life. I no longer self harm. I no longer wish to die, and I have found religion and purpose in the form of Buddhism. However, at the end of the day, I have schizophrenia. This isn't something like a cut or a bruise that will just go away. I don't mean to be grim, but the reality is I'm only 25. I have a long way to go in this life, and I'm sure I will relapse again and probably end up in the hospital again. But I no longer fear that. I'm confident that I will handle these things in a more he- he- hel- 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 healthy manner, and I will be able to protect myself from suffering as much as I did in years past. We all need help sometimes. We all get illnesses ranging from the common cold to depression. And it's okay to realize you need help. The number one message that I want to have for this video is that it's okay. Hospitals are here for a reason. You do not have to fear seeking mental help. It could genuinely save your life. If you or a loved one are in critical danger, I highly recommend speaking to a psychiatrist or even going to the emergency room like I did. Yes, going to the hospital sucks. No one wants to do that, but it can help. I am living proof. I genuinely and wholeheartedly believe I would have committed suicide last year if I had not been admitted to the hospital. I am the happiest I've ever been. Life isn't perfect. I'm okay, but it's still stressful. But that is just part of being. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. I will try to answer for anything that I may have missed during my ramblings. And if you would like to learn more about my case of schizophrenia, please check out the link to the playlist below. I sincerely wish you all happy and healthy lives. I love you all. Namo Buddhaya.